dreadful football, that our manager is horrible and that our players are whatever. That's all part of the give and take of opinions about football. Defaming the dead is something different.
You talked about your reactions being of disappointment, but also not surprise. What was the general feeling within the club?
Disgusting.
And what were the club's immediate reactions to the comments, as far as actions?
As far as actions, we were wondering, it was kind of stunned. You were going to say, I don't believe this guy is doing this again. How do we sort of change this? How do we explain the truth of Hillsborough to people? I mean, we couldn't have Stephen Cohen being the only person out there being the official recorder of the truth that happened in Hillsborough in the US. And because his truth, such as it was a tissue of lies. And we were just really, really annoyed and upset. There are 96 families in Hillsborough, on Merseyside, I should say, who don't deserve that. And we said, as I said to you, the 96 are part of the DNA of Liverpool Football Club. So we said, we've got to do something here. See, what can we do? Can we get him to walk back the comments? And then we realised, well, if he's going to walk back the comments, he's done this before, so he's probably going to lie again in the future. So it was just complete disgust, frustration, and huge annoyance.
I'll ask you to bear with me for the next question, but I do think it's very germane given the coverage of Stephen Cohen's comments, because everywhere you look, you do see transcripts of what Stephen has said over the last 4 months. What is LFC-NY's interpretation of what happened at Hillsborough?
It's the same as the Taylor report.
Really, the heart of this controversy is how Stephen Cohen's interpretation of what happened contradicts the Taylor report.
Well, sorry, Richard, if I may pull you up there. You speak of Stephen Cohen's interpretation of what happened.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and clarify that.
You and I may disagree as to whether or not Liverpool played decent football. You and I may disagree as to whether or not Liverpool play pretty football. You and I cannot disagree as to whether or not Liverpool finished second in the championship last season. That's a fact. Stephen Cohen was taking facts in existence, confirmed by the Taylor report, confirmed by eyewitnesses, confirmed by people who had been there, and said, well, I don't quite believe those. I have my own interpretation of it. It's a little like when they put your own interpretation of gravity. So when you speak of Stephen Cohen's interpretation, his interpretation, by that I presume you mean Stephen Cohen's lies.
At what point was the committee at LFC-NY formed?
Sorry, Richard, do you mean the committee about the Cohen thing or the committee in general?
As I understand it, there was a committee organized. I think you've referred to it a couple times as the Brain Trust.
Very early on, we realised that we needed to have, as I have called it, a brains trust. To sort of consider our actions, to strategize, to figure how would we react, what would we say, what would happen if we said X, what happened if Y happened, so and so. Stephen Cohen made his comments on the 13th of April. I would say that by the 28th, 29th, 30th of April, somewhere in that vicinity, that we had taken about 5 people who were members of the committee of the LFC-NY, and we had sort of shortened it, come into ourselves, so to speak, and kept things amongst ourselves to find out exactly what we're going to be doing and how we should react to matters.
And at that point, had you already adopted your goals of removing Stephen Cohen from television and radio?
That was the feeling. Initially, we were saying we wanted an apology, but very, very shortly, and I'm talking about 1 or 2 days into the campaign, we realised that no apology was ever going to be sufficient because he was always going to walk it back. So he made his comments on the 13th, shall we say, the Brains Committee coalesced by late April. I'd say by late April, it decided off the air, television and radio.
So fast forward to May 18th, and that was the day that Stephen Cohen read his first on-air apology. What was your reaction to that apology?
I think the LFC in my press release that time said, what apology? That still holds. The thing with Stephen Cohen and his apologies is that every time he's like the kid who cries every time he gets his hand caught in the cookie jar. He apologizes, I'm sorry, but he didn't mean it. He never mentioned 96. He never mentioned dead. He never mentioned Liverpool. He did, however, say, let's get this crap out of the way. And did crumple up his paper on air, showing that he didn't particularly care about this stuff, that it was just something he felt he had to do, and finished it by saying, that's it, we'll never talk about it again. That promise lasted, I believe, 13 seconds. Well, no, it may have been 3 minutes, because he was back to talking about it again 3 minutes later.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify. I used the word apology, but in that statement on May 18th that Stephen Cohen read and was briefly distributed on the World Soccer Daily website, the word apology or apologize doesn't appear. It's more of a recognition that on his part that his comments had started a controversy.
I would say, Richard, that it was more of a recognition that his comments were causing him trouble. I will remind your listeners that on the tail end of April, when we first, not the LFCNY, but all Liverpool fans, and indeed fans of football, and not just Liverpool fans, but all Liverpool fans had pointed out to him that his statements are incorrect. His reaction was, "I don't care about this, bring it on." So when Liverpool fans and, as I say, fans of football across the world did indeed, quote unquote, bring it on, we got this qualified apology. If I said something wrong, and if you were hurt, and if you were born on an odd day in February, then maybe we might apologise to you if you wake up on the right time of, qualified. Nothing very interesting, nothing very meaningful, and certainly nothing that had any long-standing effect.
Do you think if Stephen Cohen had issued a better apology on May 18th that the LFCNY would have found a way to reconcile the issue?
Rich, that's a very good question, and I've gone through that in my mind. We all have, actually. I suppose you have the possibility of diffusing the matter. Certainly the volume has been way turned up on both sides since May 18th, actually since April 13th. The fact was that once he made his statements on the 13th of April, and when we then, LFCNY, started going back to looking at his other statements and finding him making statements delighting in, bragging about, calling Liverpool fans murderers, that they murdered their own on Hillsborough. I suspect at the end of the day, I'm not certain there was a way back, given his vituperative nature and given the fact that, every apology Stephen Cohen has ever issued has been, what's that word? Worthless?
Well, at some point, it seemed that Cohen and his side recognized the gravity of the situation, and there was a mediation attempted between Cohen and your group. When did that mediation start?
Through the internet, through an anonymous email, as I was speaking to you about before. Somebody just pinged an email across the internet.
Ultimately, which people were party to that negotiation?
There was Mel Abshire, who has been doing wonderful work as the spokesman for the North American branches, the Liverpool North American branches, was contacted by a Mark Sawyer, who was an associate professor in the political science department of UCLA, with a notion to trying to mediate. And this Mark Sawyer also happened to reach out to me. At the time, I was traveling between Ireland and the US. So I had to make a very, very brief reply and say something along the lines of, "Dear sir, I received your email. Please give me more time and I'll reply in depth." But I gave a very thumbnail sketch as to what the LFCNY's position was, that this is what we wanted, this is what we expected. I believe Mel Abshire at the same time was doing pretty much the same thing. When I got a second email from Mark Sawyer, it was arrogant, it was condescending, and I certainly found it disingenuous. So my take after the second contact, the second email from Mark Sawyer, was to have nothing to do with this man. I didn't trust him. I didn't believe